Ever find yourself just staring into space, maybe after a long day, and thinking, what's it all about? What's the meaning of life? It's a question we ask ourselves, but how often do we really try to find an answer? Today we're diving into The Soul Warrior, a book I thought at first was just about entrepreneurship, but wow, it takes an interesting turn.
It really does. Right away in chapter 1, it's like the author saying, before we even talk about business, let's talk about you. He starts by quoting Viktor Frankl. Challenging the meaning of life is the truest expression of the state of being human.
Wow, that's quite a statement.
It is.
And for those who don't know, Viktor Frankl, he was in those terrible concentration camps, and even there he found that having a purpose kept him alive, literally kept him going.
It's true. Frankl's experience really shows how powerful purpose can be. It's about being resilient, about finding strength within yourself even when things are incredibly hard. And the author of The Soul Warrior takes this idea even further. He says, just like everything in nature has a purpose, a tree gives us oxygen, or a river carves out a path, we have a purpose too.
And this is where I think the author's personal story makes things even more interesting. He talks about experiencing a terrible trauma when he was a child. And while we won't go into detail here, it's important to understand how this experience leads him on his own personal search for meaning.
Right. It's not about focusing on the trauma itself, but understanding how difficult experiences can shape our lives. And it's fascinating. He talks about how he coped by throwing himself into his father's business, almost like he was trying to escape into it, and by learning English at the British Council, which is kind of funny because he wrote this whole book in English.
It really speaks to that resilience of the human spirit, doesn't it? It's amazing how these things he did to cope, as he calls them, ended up helping him become a successful entrepreneur later in life. But it wasn't all easy for him, was it?
No, not at all. He has success, but then he goes through some really challenging times. His family business struggles, he has financial problems, his mother's health declines. Everything just kind of falls apart. He describes feeling broken, like all his dreams were shattered. And I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling, even if they haven't gone through what he went through.
Absolutely. And this is where the book takes such an unexpected turn. In this moment of crisis, he turns to the Quran, specifically to the opening chapter, Al-Fatiha, looking for comfort, searching for guidance.
It's a turning point in the book for sure. Imagine finding such deep meaning in something you've known your whole life but never truly understood. He describes this aha moment where it's like he peels back the layers of what he's always known and finds this deeper truth in these verses.
He describes it not just as words, but like a conversation between him and Allah, this dialogue between a human being and the divine. And in this dialogue, he sees two pairings, two sets of ideas that become the center of how he understands life's meaning.
The first pairing is this beautiful image of humanity talking to Allah. It really emphasizes how close that relationship is. But it's the second pair that really drives his message home. That pairing is knowledge and action.
And this is where it gets really interesting. He says that knowledge without action is like having all the ingredients but never actually cooking the meal. You have the potential, but you're not using it.
Exactly. The author believes that true meaning comes from using what we know to do something that's bigger than us to make a difference. And that's where the idea of hope comes in.
Okay, so let's talk about hope. How does he connect this idea of hope to giving back and making a difference?
Yeah, this idea of knowledge leading to action, leading to hope. It's a lot to unpack. How does the author see this playing out in our everyday lives? It seems, I don't know, almost too big. I know what you mean. But the thing is, it doesn't have to be about doing these huge life-changing things. The author talks about how even when we use our knowledge in small ways to give back to others, maybe by sharing what we know how to do, by helping someone out, or even just supporting a cause we believe in, we're planting these seeds of hope.
So it's like even the small things we do, little acts of generosity, just showing up for each other can make a difference.
Exactly. And, this idea isn't something you only find in one religion or culture or anything like that. The author actually quotes something from Corinthians in the Bible. It says that God loves a cheerful giver. And it really gets at this universal truth that giving to others brings meaning to our lives.
It's really interesting, isn't it? It doesn't seem to matter if it comes from faith or just from wanting to help out. Giving seems to be such a powerful thing.
You're right. And it's not just about feeling good, which is important, of course, but there's actually been research that shows when people are more altruistic, when they're giving to others, they tend to be happier. It's like giving back is good for the soul and the mind,
So it doesn't sound like the author is giving us like a one-size-fits-all answer about the meaning of life, right? It's
Yeah.
more like he's giving us a way to think about it. Like, it's about figuring out how our knowledge and our actions and our desire to contribute all fit together.
Exactly. He's telling us to recognize what makes us special, what we each have to offer, and that when we share those gifts, when we plant those seeds of hope, we find a deeper sense of meaning in life. And when I think about it, the author's own story really shows this idea in action.
You're right. This is someone who went through a horrific trauma, but he didn't let it define him. Instead, he found a way to use that pain, to give it purpose. He took everything he went through, the good and the bad, and turned it into something positive.
It's really pretty amazing. The author even writes about how those early experiences he had, as tough as they were, taught him things, gave him skills and perspectives that ended up helping him succeed later in life.
Like, he learned how to handle difficult situations, to be resilient, to think outside the box, and find creative solutions.
Yeah, exactly. He learned to adapt, to never give up, to see opportunity in places you wouldn't expect. And honestly, those are amazing qualities to have, and not just in the business world either, right? Like, they're important in life.
Makes you think about how much we go through that we might think of as like holding us back, but that are actually opportunities for us to grow and become stronger.
It's all about how we look at it, right? It's about seeing those experiences in a new way. Instead of seeing them as limitations, we can see them as chances to grow. The author's story is a great example of this whole idea of finding the good, finding the strength in the things that hurt us.
And it's not about pretending the hard stuff didn't happen, right? It's more about acknowledging it, but then saying, okay, I can still choose how my story goes from here.
Totally. It's about using what we learned, using the resilience we built to create something good. It's about turning pain into purpose. And by doing that, we can really make a difference for other people.
It's like this ripple effect, Just by sharing his story, the author gives hope to people who might be struggling with their own pain, letting them know that they're not alone.
And speaking of hope, it's pretty powerful that the author ends the chapter with this line: "Life is about giving and hope." It seems so simple when you say it like that, but it's such a deep statement, don't you think?
For sure. It's like he's challenging us to think about how we can use everything we know, all our experiences, to do something good.
Yeah, he's saying we all have a role to play in building a more hopeful future, and it doesn't require like some huge grand gesture or anything.
No, exactly. Sometimes the most impactful things are the simplest acts of kindness, compassion, and generosity. And when those things multiply, they can create a wave of positive change.
Absolutely. And it's not just about what we give to others either. It's about the hope we nurture within ourselves, that inner spark that helps us face life's challenges with grace and determination.
It really makes you think about the kind of legacy we'll leave behind. What seeds of hope do we want to plant in this world? How will we make our mark? That is a powerful question to think about. It stays with you, doesn't it? That question, what will we be remembered for? How will we make a difference?
And it's a question we all ask in a way. No matter what we believe, we all want to know how we can use our skills and passions to do some good in the world. And the amazing thing is that it doesn't have to be some big, complicated thing.
Exactly. Sometimes the most powerful things are the simplest, right? Like just listening to someone, offering a helping hand, having a real connection with another person. Those are all ways we can plant seeds of hope.
They really are. And, in a world that often feels kind of crazy and unpredictable, I think the small acts of kindness, of generosity, of hope, those are the things that can really make a difference.
What I love about The Soul Warrior, and even about our conversation today, is that it reminds us that we create meaning. We're not just along for the ride. We're active participants. We have the power to shape not only our own lives, but also the lives of those around us.
It's a journey, isn't it? Figuring out who we are and what we're meant to do. And like any good journey, there are going to be bumps in the road. But ultimately, it's about embracing those challenges, learning from them, and using them to fuel our desire to make a positive impact.
And it all comes back to asking those big questions,
Yeah.
thinking about what really matters to us, what we're passionate about, and then actually doing something about it, aligning who we are with what we do, figuring out what we're meant to contribute.
Exactly. It's about realizing that we all have something special inside of us, something unique to offer. And when we share that light with others, we're not just lighting their way, we're lighting our own way too.
Beautifully said. Well, I think we've done some pretty deep diving today.
We have. It's always a pleasure to have these conversations, to really dig into these important topics.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe something we talked about today will spark an idea for our listeners or inspire them to go out and spread a little more hope in the world.
I hope so.
Until next time. Stay curious, stay open-hearted, and never forget how much power you have to make a difference.